being held with Mr. Bill Earnhardt at his home at 815 Ferncliff Drive in Mooresville. He is, today is January the 9th, January the 10th, 2006. Mr. Earnhardt, would you first tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to Mooresville?
Thank you. I was born in Albemarle in Stanley County and lived most of my early life there in the county. I came to Mooresville first in 1940, and I was married to the former Mary Morrow. I went through the Second World War in Europe and came back here at the conclusion of the Second World War in January of 1946 and went into the business with Morrow Brothers, with my two brothers-in-law. Morrow Brothers was located on South Main Street, on the corner there, across from the old depot. I worked with them and worked with that business until the end of 1982 when I retired. My first wife died in 1983, and the last day of 1985 I married Ann Howard, and we're married and living here now, and just recently observed our 20th wedding anniversary. So that's about my background, I suppose.
Well, what can you tell us about the history of Mooresville as you remember it?
Well, I'd say the history of Mooresville for me began when I came here in January of 1946, and there are a number of things I remember about the time and the time following that. One of them I remember was the Mooresville Mills. It was quite a large plant at that time that employed about 3,500 people. And not long after the war, it was purchased by Julius Abernathy from Newton. It was said about $4 million he paid for it, and he didn't keep it very long until he sold it to Burlington Industries for a reported $12 million. That plant closed a few years ago and is no longer in operation. It's recently been renovated, but there's nothing going on there now. Let's see, Mooresville had, I think, about 6,000 population when I came here, and it's about 24,000 now, it is said. Did I mention that there was a professional baseball team here, Class D, known as the Mooresville Moors? They were quite popular, and they've long since been gone.
Didn't Burlington, the mill, sponsor that?
Yeah, I think it was sponsored by the Mooresville Mills, yes. We had rail passenger service here until 1951, and they discontinued that passenger service. They asked the heads of all the civic clubs in town to write a letter requesting that rail service not be discontinued, but that was done. I wrote to the railway myself as head of the Mooresville Lions Club, but they discontinued rail service anyway. We had a Roses 5 and 10 in the 100 block of South Main Street, and to the rear of that building there was a seed cleaning business owned at that time by Hugh Sloop Sr., and that was later bought by Bill Brawley, and he moved the business up to North Main and erected two new large buildings up there, and that business is still operated, known as the Brawley Company, owned and operated by Bill Brawley's son, Bob, and they sell farm and garden products such as seeds, fertilizer, and especially plants of all kinds. And we're working with Bill Brawley's daughter, Ann Brawley Brown, on the Mooresville history at this time. There were two newspapers here in Mooresville back in 1946, the Mooresville Enterprise, and owned by Mr. Deaton, and the Mooresville Tribune, owned by Tom McKnight. Mr. McKnight purchased the Enterprise and merged the two newspapers, and the Mooresville Tribune is still in existence, is the local paper. Fletcher Davis was a well-known photographer back some many years ago, and he was a good friend of Tom McKnight at the Mooresville Tribune, and I think all of the photographs that went in the newspaper were taken by Fletcher Davis. There was one incident that gained national recognition back there many years ago, and they were out in the Stumpy Creek section off of Perth Road west of Mooresville, and they saw a stunning, tall, statuesque girl in shorts leaning back against a large tree. They took her photograph and printed it in the Mooresville Tribune along with a story, and they called her Long Sam, referring to the girl in the Lil Abner comic strip. Her name was Dorothy Brown. Tom McKnight was a master of words with writing, and he wrote a sensational piece about Long Sam Brown, and it was picked up by Jim Bishop, another gifted syndicated columnist, and it gained national attention at that time, and it ended up that they took Dorothy Brown to the Ed Sullivan Show, and all of us saw her on television in New York. Now, let's see, Mooresville had two theaters back in 1946, and they've both long since been closed. The Eterner Hardware was one of the early businesses operated by the Eterner Sr. and his brother Marvin, and later by his son D.E. Elmer Turner Jr. Today, that's, I suspect, is the oldest business in Mooresville. It's owned and operated by Jack Moore. Cascade Rayon Mills was bought by Burlington Industries and operated out in the Cascade Village for many years. Many of the employees came from Lexington to start up that plant. It's been closed for several years now. Civic clubs have been an important part of that Mooresville history. The Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, the Lions Club, Optimist, and others. I've been privileged to be a member of the Lions Club since I came here in 1946. I have been a member now for 60 years. I've served all of the offices and some district offices, statewide offices. This Lions Club was founded in 1939, and it's been very active all through the years, giving assistance to needy people, with special emphasis being given to visually impaired people.
Mr. Earnhardt, I
Yes.
know that the Lions Club has an annual Fiddlers Convention.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
That's the mainstay of our several fundraisers, is our annual Old Time Fiddlers Convention, held the last Saturday night in March each year. That's been going on for almost from the very beginning, and we have bands coming here from different parts of the state: South Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and Virginia. Old-time fiddling and bluegrass bands. That money we use for local. We buy many glasses, hearing aids, and help needy people in many different ways. We have 4 past district governors in our club presently. So I suppose that's about the history I have of Mooresville. If either of you wish to add to it.
And you want to add to it?
Well, when I was growing up, we had that Judge Rankin deal. It had everything you could name.
And that was the building that where Mara was. And now we have this.
That Morrow Brothers building is currently being converted into an upscale restaurant by Bob Ammon, who has purchased all the buildings in that 100 block of South Main, as I understand, and it soon will be open for business.
Okay, can you tell us, you mentioned the Lions Club, and I know that you were very, very active in the Lions Club throughout the years, and we talked about the Old Time Fiddlers Convention. What were some of the other things that the Lions Club did?
Well, as fundraisers, we used to sell fruit cakes annually. broom sales, where we had door-to-door broom sales for many, many years. We have gumball machines around in the various businesses in Mooresville where people drop coins in there and we get a percentage of that. We had mint dispensers around in different businesses where people drop in coins and get a package of candy mints. Those are some of the fundraisers, and we grant a $1,000 scholarship to a graduating senior of Mooresville High School every year. We've been doing that for many years, and we also grant a scholarship to a graduating senior of South Iredale High School. We have numbers of people around Mooresville that attend South Iredale High School. Other things, we will look at any need that is presented to us and consider it the merits of it and whether we would use money to assist these various needs. We're not limited in what we do.
Sounds like a very worthy civic organization.
Bill, would you care to comment about the Second World War? I think you...
Well, the Second World War, I don't have any very good memories. I was living in Long Beach, California in went out there in 1942, and in 1943 I was selected. I received a greetings from the president, said, "You've been selected to serve in the armed forces," and I had my training at Camp Roberts, California, and I was sent to England, and about 3 weeks before the invasion of Normandy, France, I went across to the hedgerows of Normandy 12 days after D-Day, and we fought in the hedgerows for a period of time, and then we broke out and raced across France and into Germany. They pulled us out and sent us up into Luxembourg and Belgium when Hitler made his last big offensive, and then we went back across Germany, and I ended up in Czechoslovakia. I was there about 3 weeks before the war ended, and I stayed there in the Army of Occupation until December, and I came back and arrived in Mooresville on the first day of January in 1946. I served in the 90th Infantry Division, and we had some harrowing times, as one might imagine, and for some reason God saw fit to let me come back uninjured, and I've always been thankful. And I might add that I always believed that God had a purpose for allowing me to come back, and I have felt that that purpose was to give assistance to people who were in need, and I have used the Lions Club as a vehicle through which I have been able to serve many people all through the years, and I have been most happy to do whatever I could to help someone else.
Weren't there a good number of men from Mooresville who were in World War II?
There were, I'm sure, but I don't know who they were specifically. I know Thurston McNeely was captain in the Air Force, as I recall, and but see, I was living in California at the time, and I had not lived in Mooresville at that time, so I really am not acquainted with who all left here and went to the war. I did join the Veterans of Foreign Wars when I came back and was active in it for a few years, and I also joined the Lions Club, and I stuck with the Lions Club all through the years. The Veterans of Foreign Wars is no longer active here.
Mooresville has certainly benefited from your choosing to come here after you were discharged from the service, and as you said, apparently God did have a purpose for you to come here, and we're glad that you did.
Well, I thank you for that. I feel very fortunate to have survived the Second World War and to have lived here and been a citizen of Mooresville until past my 89th birthday, and I did suffer a stroke 4 years ago, and it left me handicapped. But I'm thankful to be able to move from one place to another with the help of a walker or a cane. I'm just thankful for what I can do, and I don't complain about what I can't do.
Bill, talk a little bit more about changes in Mooresville. You say you came here in 1946, and that's now almost 60 years ago. You mentioned changes in population in a couple of industries, but what are some other things that you've noticed in Mooresville since you've been here that have changed?
Well, the business principally was centered on Main Street for many years, and then with the advent of shopping malls and shopping strips, while most businesses have moved out of the main business district and out west of town. There are shopping centers out there.
What were some of the important businesses in downtown Mooresville in your early days? The Roses store and what were some other things?
Well, I think, as I said, Belk was probably the centerpiece, and there was a Setzer's gift watch shop and Kelly clothing store that's operated now is by Johnny Smith, known as John Franklin Incorporated. There was a Black Roller Furniture down the street, and Rose's 5 and 10, as I mentioned, and John Mack and Son was one of the very important businesses, and, with Mitchell and Madeline and others, and Charles Mack and Son wholesale grocery business, and his son John has recently donated that building on East Center Avenue that can be used as the Mooresville Museum if it's decided to use it for that purpose. There is another house, the Espy Brawley Mansion in northwest Mooresville, that has been thought of as a possible site of the museum, so it remains to be seen where it will be located.
Bill, that's the large house up on 115, kind of across from the Army and the bowling alley.
Yes, it's off to the right, across the railroad from Highway 115 north, about across opposite the bowling alley. Gibson Brothers Furniture. Gibson came here and bought the Culver Furniture store originally. They came from Concord, and the Culvers was down on Broad Street. And incidentally, the town hall was down there when I came here, and W.N. Johnson Sons Coal and Ice Camp. They had the frozen food lockers down there for rent, and W.N. Johnson, let's see, the other Johnson Hardware up on North Main Street. And it's known now as Johnson Road, is it not? Some kind of business is there now. And let's see, the clothing store.
What about grocery stores?
Yes, there were 2 or 3 grocery stores there on North Main. The A&P store was there, and Teeter, well, Willis and Bill Teeter each, as I understand, were managers of A&P store somewhere, and they went together and formed the Teeter Brothers and built a store down on South Broad, and then they built several other stores, one in Newton, I recall, and then they later merged with the Harris from Charlotte and formed the Harris Teeter stores, which got to be a rather large chain of stores. Then John McLean operated a grocery store there on Main Street and Meat Market. And then Hugh and Webb McLean, the brothers, operated the store there, and then they built up on North Main, several blocks above the business district. And then the Teeter Brothers built up there in what is known as the Port City Shopping Center. They've long since been out of business there. Sorry?
Yeah, there were barbershops downtown too, weren't there?
Yes, there was several barber shops. Ann's father, Ernest Webb Howard, operated the Howard and Baxter barber shop across from Belk on North Main, and then there was Sam and Overcash and George Goodman ran a barber shop just north of Turner Hardware there. I don't recall at the moment if there were other barber shops.
What about drugstores? Were there drugstores downtown?
Well, yes, there was a Goodman drugstore was there on the corner of Center Avenue and Main Street, directly across Main Street from the old depot, and then up on the further up North Main was Mooresville Drug, which later was incorporated into part of Belk, as I recall. And then there was a Miller Drug Store in the 100 block of North Main, and Mr. Price operated it, and his son Sam Price became with him, and then Sam went over and built the clinic pharmacy over across the street from the Lowrance Hospital. John Gardner eventually bought it, and he established a chain of drugstores and sold out later to Revco. Of course, those drugstores have been closed now for years, and of course the Lowrance Hospital was bought by some out-of-town firm, and they moved it several years ago, built a new one down about 3 miles south of Mooresville, so the hospital is no longer in town. And concurrent with that, many of the doctor's offices moved down in the area off the hospital. Some of them still are on Carpenter Avenue. So there have been quite a lot of changes and so much building here, it's unreal. You go out any direction, certainly west of Mooresville, and you're just in housing developments continuously almost to the river, about 8 miles. Built up a lot down around Davidson and Cornelius. So the area has really grown in the past many years.
What about South Main Street? We kind of left them out. Down in the area in front of Mooresville Mills, there was a cafe.
Well, yes, there was, when I came here, some buildings there on Main Street in front of the north end of the Mooresville Mills, and the mill offices were there. There was a white drugstore there at that time. Stone Street's Cafe was a popular spot back there for many years, run by O.C. Stone Street. His grandson, O.C., I guess the third, is still here in Mooresville, I believe. Then the Mooresville Moors Baseball Park was across the railroad there on South Broad Street from the Mooresville Mills. And there are many houses. I believe there is a sign down there now indicating the Mooresville Mill, historic Mooresville Mill Village. All the houses, they were owned by the Mooresville Mills and Burlington Industries, and they later sold them to the residents or whoever wanted to buy them. But it's still known as the Mooresville Mills Village. There were some stores along there on Brawley Street at the south end of the mill. Carter Crabb, I remember, operated a store there. Yes, the Mooresville Library has been a very important part of the city, and it's recently received a renovation and enlargement, and our city hall has recently received a renovation and enlargement. And
Excuse me for interrupting you. Beside the library, there is a large white building, white house, that is now owned by a law firm. What was that building used for? Did it belong to the mill?
That building was owned by the Williams family. S. Clay Williams one time was president or chair of the board of R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. And Tom Brim Williams lived, as I recall, at the end of Broad Street in a house there off to the right. And Lillian Williams lived on West McClellan there, one of the sisters. But some of the Williams had that house, I believe.
This is the same Williams family that donated the land where that donated the first library.
Yes, the Williams people donated the land where the Mooresville Library is. That building now, the old residence, has been renovated, and it's occupied by some attorneys. Who are they? Vicki West and
Cliff Holmesley, I believe. Cliff Holmesley.
oh yeah, Cliff Holmesley and some other attorneys are in that house now. Anything else you can think of that I might say?
Bill, do you remember when you came here, churches in Mooresville? There used to be at least 2, maybe 3 churches on North Main Street that had since moved to other locations.
As I recall, the ARP church was a small white building located across the street from the present town hall, and they many years ago built a new nice brick building on Carpenter Avenue. The Lutheran church, as I recall, was located along there somewhere, and they built then on let's see, were they on Institute Street for a while? And
They were on the corner of Institute and Main Street.
yeah,
One there, yeah.
That's where the present fire.
right, or the,
And there's one building behind there that was part of that church.
and that's the Masonic Hall now.
Yeah.
Right.
Then they built, the Lutheran Church built down on Fieldstone Road, now St. Mark's Lutheran Church. And there was Second Presbyterian was down there just past the library at the corner of Church Street and East Wilson. And they moved many years ago on the Fieldstone Road and renamed it Fieldstone Presbyterian Church. So the churches have spread out somewhat from what they originally were, clustered in town.
Another thing, I believe it used to be downtown that it's now moved out, the automobile dealers.
Yes, you're correct. For many years, Safety Chevrolet Company, operated by Fred and Jim McMorrow, was there on Broad Street. It was
Near the ice cream plant.
yes, next to the Mooresville Ice Cream Company, which is still there, by the way, still operated by the Millsaps family. Randy Marion eventually bought the Chevrolet place and the Pontiac place, which is located on the corner of Broad Street and McClelland, and he moved that out on Highway 150 West. Then the Ford dealership was down there on Broad Street, and they moved out on Highway 150 West. So all the automobile dealerships moved out of town.
What about banks and savings loans downtown?
Well, there was the First National Bank there near the corner of Center Avenue and Main Street, and they were merged with the bank from Lincoln, as I recall, and it became the Carolina First National Bank. Then NCNB took the bank over back some years ago, and eventually it began to merge in with other banks, and it became Bank of America. Then let's see, there was the First Piedmont Bank, started in Davidson, and it was taken over. It was up on the 100 block of North Main. It was eventually taken over by First Union, and there was the Citizens Savings and Loan was down on the corner of North Church and Iredale Avenue, and it was BB&T Bank bought it and moved up on Main Street, and then there was the Mooresville Federal Savings and Loan. Of course, with the scandal in the savings and loan industry back some years ago, most of the savings and loan quickly renamed themselves banks, so it became the Mooresville Savings Bank, and they have branches around, one in Huntersville, I believe, and others. So those two savings and loan are the only ones I recall when I came here. Had what? Yeah, there was well, actually there had been two hotels, haven't there? There was one there on the Westmore between Main Street and Central Methodist Church. And then there was a Barrow Brothers originally located in what they call the old hotel building on Main Street. That's along about where First Union is. And then they moved down in the 100 block of South Main. And eventually, in 1953, Morrow Brothers took over the old Rankin building after Claude Mayhew closed the Rankin Company business there, and Morrow Brothers expanded there. Later sold that business to Jim Suit in 1972, when both of the Morrows, for health reasons, had to get out of business, and I worked with Jim Suit for 10 years and retired in the end of 1982, and he eventually went out of business.
Here you mentioned First National Bank. There was also another location. I guess their original location was down on South Main Street beside of D.E. Turner.
Well, that's where they were when I came here, was
right
next to D.E. Turner Hardware, yes. I don't know what that building's being used for today, if it's being used. I just don't recall, but yes, it was beside of D.E. Turner Hardware, and Onai Houston was cashier, as I recall, at the time I came. Joyce Earnhardt worked there, and John McConnell worked there, and Emmett Cruz worked there. He later became a neighbor of mine when I built my house on North Magnolia in 1951. Emmett Cruz lived just around the corner. He was a former school teacher, as I remember. Married a local girl. Was her name Ann Brown? It seems to me it was.
Something else that used to be downtown that's not there anymore. Dry cleaners.
Oh yes, Mayhew Cleaners. Took my cleaning there for many years. Kent Carr worked there. It was owned by, what's her name?
Winona Smith, maybe?
Winona Smith was the owner. I don't believe Winona was ever married, was she?
I don't know. But that store was up here where Brothers is now.
Yes, it was.
It's south of there.
It was along there. Also, a block at the corner of Moore Avenue and Main Street, there was a taxi stand when I came here, and later they built the current building there. I believe the Troutman family erected a building there for Tom Delk as a 5 and 10 cent store, as I recall. Then Jim Suit eventually bought that building, moved Morrow Brothers up there, and then he exchanged with Gabriel, and Jim moved across the street in front of Belk. Eventually went out of business. I believe Gabriel is still running sporting goods there on the corner of Main and Moore Avenue.
Also, another institution that was downtown was Cabin's Funeral Home.
Yes, Cabin Funeral Home was in an old residence there on North Main Street, just north of the current Bank of America. And there was Bill Cabin and Bob and Courtney. Their father had died when I came here, I believe, and J.P. Cabin. And Miss Clara Cabin was a much-loved woman in Mooresville, and she lived to be, 102 years old, as I recall. Then they built a place over on what we call the 150 bypass. It's Plaza Drive now. And then Bill left and went down to Huntersville and opened a place down there, opened a branch of Cabin Funeral Home. Bill later died of cancer, and Courtney Cabin was known as Smokey. He later died, and Bob lived longer than the others, but I believe he's gone
I
now.
think he passed away last year.
Bob was a member of Central United Methodist Church.
Wasn't there another funeral home in Mooresville down on South Main?
There was Bunch Funeral Home was on South Main at the corner of McClelland, or near the corner of McClelland. And later, I believe the Whataburger came in there and tore that house down and built there. And at one time, Sam Ingram operated a restaurant in that old house, the townhouse. And he later moved out near the lake and operated a place out there. And now there was a Tasty Freeze up on North Main, about next to where Brawley Company is now, operated by John Smitchko, I think. And then there was a Connoisseur restaurant on a little bit farther north there, where the Public Service Company is now, approximately. So there have been many, many changes in businesses, as well as other changes in town. Yes, Mitchell Community College. Mitchell College in Statesville became a community college many years ago, and they opened a branch in Mooresville, and they offer quite a lot of courses there at Mitchell Community College on North Academy, across the street from the Central United Methodist Church. Incidentally, I was married in the Broad Street United Methodist Church in 1940. Came back to live there, and my wife died, and I married Ann Howard, and she joined the Broad Street with me, and after a couple of years we moved up to Central, where she had gone as a child, and where her family were still members, and we're still members there at Central United Methodist.
Who was the minister at Broad Street when you were married?
Oh, the minister at Broad Street, I can see him now. His name somehow doesn't come to me. When I married Ann, it was John Jordan and Harold Austin, both. John had just left, gone to Charlotte, and we had asked him to marry us, and Harold Austin came, so we had both of them. I might say a little incident. We were to be married at 7 o'clock on Saturday evening, and Ann and I were waiting in the vestibule, and at 7 o'clock, Harold Austin came running back there, and he said, "John Jordan is not here. What'll I do?" I said, "Marry us, man, marry us. That's why we're here." About that time, John came in, so they both had participated in the wedding.
I still have family in Central, and that's in the and you go away and come back.
Harold Austin was originally from over Albemarle, Stanley County, where I came from. He's a very folksy person.
Okay, okay, anything else you want to add, Bill, to this?
I don't know of anything else to add unless you two think of something.
Well, you've given us a vast amount of knowledge of the history of Mooresville. We really appreciate all that you've done to help us remember Mooresville and help us, and this has been an absolutely wonderful interview. Thank you.
Well, what I'm going to remember most, I think, is you said I had a vast knowledge, and I think it's I don't feel like I know very much.
Oh, you do.
Anyway, this has been a pleasure to recount some of the history of Mooresville, and I thank you for allowing me to participate in it.
Thank you.
Thank you.